Hello everyone, it's Questquenchers here today, and I want to talk about Dragon's Dogma 2. So, firstly, I just want to say that it could have been the Breath of the Wild of Capcom. And what I mean by this, I mean like it could have had more complex dungeons instead of the tombs and caves we got. It also required a few more enemies, such as maybe the Hydra or the iron. There was like a knight that was like a magical knight. It could have had some more unique monsters and stuff like that, and enemies. It really could have been something much more that would have elevated Capcom's status. But unfortunately, I have an inkling that it was rushed. By rushed, I mean like it was a cash grab at sort of like I think it was in March when it released. It was just to get out and it squeezed a little bit more money out of the consumer. It didn't have enough sort of dungeons, as I've said, and you can see that there's meant to be like there's different little places in the map, and it was just missing a bunch of things, and it is very disappointing because I really really like the game we got, but unfortunately it just wasn't enough. It had a lackluster story, some really confusing sort of story traits and stuff. It didn't like properly end certain arcs and stuff like that. As well as for like, even though they said like, oh, there's a romance system and stuff like that, it wasn't really there. It really wasn't. And there was a few more things they said that kind of was like a backhanded, and not a lie, but it was just like over exaggerated as gaming businesses do, and it's very annoying because it's not fair at the end of the day doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's sort of like my kind of take on it. That it could have been the Breath of the Wild of Capcom. It could have been one of those games that solidified Capcom as a great game developer. But unfortunately, it needed more enemies, like just common enemies, like you got your goblins, but it needed something else other than goblins and stuff like that for like those kind of things. And it also needed some randomization. What I mean by this is enemies that spawned there before, they spawned from a pool of enemies that could potentially be there. So instead of goblins, it's Saurians. Instead of Saurians, it will be maybe a boss or kind of thing. But it feels like it's also static. That every time you run past a place, it's either goblins attacking you, and that's about it. It'll always be goblins here instead of like Saurians or another enemy type or harpies and all that stuff. It felt incredibly repetitive, especially when the game is designed for like with New Game Plus and you go round and round and stuff like that to explore more and to unlock further things and all that stuff. It is very disappointing that it is very static in the way it's created, even though the open world is cool and stuff like that, but it needed to be a little bit more dynamic with enemies and stuff like that. Of course, it needed to be more dynamic in the fact that there was cool loot in these caves and dungeons, and the caves were so short. There was some long ones, but it was few and far between, and it was very lacking, which is immensely disappointing. Like it could have been so much more, and that's sort of the thing you will hear a lot from the Dragon's Dogma community, that it could have been much more. And that's why people are calling for like DLC, because it was a great experience, but once you kind of it just wasn't enough because it needed a few more like big enemy monsters. It needed a few more normal enemies and stuff like that, and then it needed the randomized sort of little thing because mods have done it, and if mods can do it, then the developers can definitely do it. Um, it sort of like picks from a pool and stuff like that, and notes what enemies you fought before. It can be done, and it has been done. I've seen it done, which is a shame. It really needed more, and that's just the thing with Dragons Dogma, that it always needed a little bit more. I really enjoyed Dragon's Dogma 1. I thought it was really great with the with the layered armor types and all that stuff. It was a very unique for a game. And to come away from that it's it just feels like we've lost more than we've gained here. Like the combat system is great and all that stuff, but I do feel like Dragon's Dogma 1 does still feel superior to it. Of course, graphically, Dragon's Dogma 2 all the way and all that stuff, and movement wise, it kind of feels better than the first one. But it's still there's more to it. I feel in Dragon's Dogma 1. But there's more story hooks, and then there's more focus on talking and the speeches and all that stuff from the dragon. Whereas in this one, it feels like it wasn't really there. It was very muted, and the story was a bit confusing and just all around everywhere. There wasn't proper resolutions and stuff like that, which is a shame. And I feel like it could have been done better, even with the Unreal world where, Sven is the sovereign now and all that stuff. But it's just like, but we didn't see Disa get like stripped of that and all that stuff. So it is a big shame. It needed to be done better. And needed to be more thought put into it and all that stuff. Needed more, more enemies, more dungeons. Like imagine going into a dungeon and it's it starts off as a cave, that it goes into like a complex underground city or something like that, you know? And it'd be more not a city, but like a big old ruin. And there was elements of that, like, oh, interesting stuff. But it just turned out to be tombs all the time instead of like an underground sort of dwelling kind of thing. Like in Dragon's Dogma 1, we had the mines and stuff, and that was a big dungeon. It felt big. There was different layers to it and stuff like that. Multiple enemies in there too. And it was, even though I think it was just trolls. Not trolls, the other guys. But it was, it was scary going into there and all that layering and stuff. You're like, oh, I need to go out and go back. There's been a lot of big enemies and stuff. I'll explore it again later when I'm more powerful and stuff. And this game just doesn't have that. I feel like it doesn't have it properly. Like I go into a cave and it's just a bunch of goblins, wolves, or undead. There was the odd time where there was slightly harder goblins and I died, but still, it wasn't. It wasn't really like, oh, that was challenging. It's because it was just me and my pawn, and if I was playing like just the two of us instead of having, but if I had like a real big team and stuff, it would have been a breeze. But that was sort of like a self-inflicted debuff. But it really needed more dungeons, more complex dungeons, not just cave system and tombs. It needed like I said, old ruins of this old like before time with like the big statues and all that stuff. I can't remember what it was called, the walking automaton kind of thing. There should have been more sort of esque ruins of that and stuff, like an old kingdom or an ancient bygone time and stuff like that. Instead of just having it in one small sector, it could have been literally this place where Moundenbach Batal was built on top of an old kingdom that spewed the entire land, and and stuff like that. And it could have been so much more, having those kind of like little types and stuff like that. And maybe it goes into big open underground caves that has like a slither, like in Dragon's Dogma 1. It did have that. It had like a big bridge with a sprawling chasm, and it was just like, wow, you can see a little bit of cracks in there, and there's bridges with like a big troll guard in it and stuff like that. And it just didn't have that kind of dungeons kind of aspect, which is a big shame because it really should have had it. It didn't have, why didn't it have those moments where you're like, I'm underground in a dungeon and this is huge and there's so much loot here and unique equipment. I am really enjoying this. And having that multiple times, because it occurred multiple times in the first one. There's multiple times I can think of. There's that quest where you have to collect the what do you call them, tablets and stuff. There's the one, the mines, and then you have another dungeon that I can't remember the name of, but I remember how it was, and I was just like that, and it was a decent amount. And then you had the different forest regions that had the mist and everything. And I don't feel like you get that here. You don't get the uniqueness and stuff like that. You don't get like the mystery and of the land and all that stuff. It's kind of just gone. You don't have that. And it's a real big shame because it could have been so much more. Like I said, it could have been the Breath of the Wild of the Capcom. It could have been one of the main staples, but they chose to rush it. And I think that's why that like a few people left there, a few important roles and stuff. I don't know if there's still anyone at the head of it developing it anymore. I don't think we'll get DLC for it anymore. I think it's a pretty much one and done kind of done game. There is hope for like maybe it will be at the Tokyo Game Awards or something like that, TGA or TGS, whatever you call it. But I think it's done. I think focusing on Monster Hunter Wilds, I do think that it was sort of a demo in a way for it. And more like I definitely prefer Dragon's Dogma over Monster Hunter Wilds. It just the combat feels better. Like being able to climb on the monsters and stuff just feels nicer. But yeah, unfortunately, I do think it's a pretty much one and done game. So yeah, and that seems to be a thing with quite a few games recently that they come out, it's poor performance and all that stuff, and then no DLC to sort of redeem the game. There's been like the exception to the rule is Cyberpunk. I think Dragon's Dogma needs a Cyberpunk as going around, sort of fixing things, fixing the story and all that stuff. But unfortunately, it just hasn't achieved the heights that we all wanted it to. And I think a lot of fans are disappointed and kind of done with it. I haven't visited Dragon's Dogma in a while. I'm currently just running around it just to capture this video. I've just seen like a few comments and stuff, and Capcom keeps on, pushing other stuff that's coming out in 2026 and all that stuff. You're just like, well, why is Dragon's Dogma stuff? It did well. Like it sold 3 million. But I don't think they want that number. They want like 10 million now and stuff like that. But if you don't put enough effort in, you don't get enough money out. So that's what you get. Anyway, that's all from me. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.